The Brooklyn Nets fire Steve Nash. Okay, that's something. How about trying to hire Ime Udoka? What? We're going to talk about all that. And Jimmy Butler makes a bold declaration and backs it up. It's all right now on the Locked On NBA podcast.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Wednesdays never disappoint on the Locked On Podcast Network, Locked On NBA. We always seem to have something to talk about, and I love it when it's us two. Me, John Karalis, host of the Locked On Celtics podcast, and on Twitter, soon to be not verified. Thank you, Elon Musk, at John_Karalis.
And I'm Jake Madison, host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at NOLA Jake. And man, Tuesdays just get everything, and we get to talk about it here on the show. Like, it is so. I texted you. I'm looking at them right now here on my phone. It was like, LOL, gotta love Tuesday news, assuming you got the alerts that Steve Nash was fired. And it only got better from there.
Oh my God. Yeah. So let's, when we started planning out this show, we thought the Brooklyn game would be something to talk about. We thought the Heat game would be something to talk about. And unfortunately, those fans for the Minnesota, Phoenix, and Orlando OKC, you're gonna have to listen to go listen to the Game to Game podcast, which is on this feed. Check it out, Game to Game, insiders, insight on all of these games, all the results, in depth on all four games. So go check that out. But on this podcast, later on, segment 3, we're gonna play our real or fake game in conjunction with Jimmy Butler's declaration. We're going to win this bleeping championship. And segment 2 and segment 1 will be all about the Brooklyn Nets. Segment 2 will be about the Ime Udoka side, which I have a lot of knowledge about and did my entire Locked On Celtics podcast on that. But let's start, Jake, with the shocking. Oh my God, so shocking. I am so shocked, Jake, that Steve Nash has been fired.
Yeah, so is Kevin Durant too, as he said after the game that I was shocked to hear that Steve Nash was fired. That's like the call is coming from inside the house, right? Like, we're all trying to find the guy that did this here. It's like every joke possible. Like, yeah, so there's a couple of things with this. First and foremost, Nash was not a good coach. He'd never been on a bench before like that. He struggled with getting them to play defense and doing things like that, and like just motivating his guys in simple ways. Just in terms of how he was as a coach, yeah, probably deserved to be fired, but he was also put into an impossible situation that has done him no favors whatsoever. With this offseason, them wanting to trade Kyrie, weren't finding a suitor for that. Then Kevin Durant says, I want to be traded. No one ponies up an offer for him, so he has to come back and says, fine, I'll come back if you fire Steve Nash and Sean Marks. Neither of those things happened. You combine that with their 2-5 start. Yeah, he was going to get canned at some point because they needed a scapegoat, and it's very clear the players run the team. Not necessarily wrong in that, taking that approach either. And so, you know what? Good for Steve Nash. Get out of this. This is a dude that is like universally beloved. He doesn't need this kind of drama in his life. Go back to California, play your beach volleyball and soccer, and like live your best life. You know, they said this was like a mutual partying. This is like what Stan Van Gundy had said after the Pelicans fired him, right? They said, we don't want you here anymore, but we're going to continue to pay you. And I said, okay. So it was mutual, right? Like that's what this is here. It's a firing that he's like, yeah, sure, thank you, in a sense.
And I definitely remember saying over the summer, Steve Nash should just tell him, you know what? I fine. You want me gone? I'm gone. I don't need this crap. He's still Steve Nash. I think he's pretty set for life when it comes to money. And I think he can go do other things that can get him plenty of money.
He was consulting for the Warriors for a period of time. Like, dude's life was fantastic.
Absolutely. So I never thought, I mean, for me, I'd hang out and be, I'm going to suck until you fire me. That's something I have done before. So I'm going to get my money on the way out. But so kudos to him for getting his money on the way out.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
But I said from the beginning of these Kevin Durant rumors that Nash should just be like, hey guys, thanks. And, go, have fun with whatever you're trying to do.
There's no fun
That is, you said it perfectly though. He never had a chance. Steve Nash never had a chance. And I liked the hire when he came in because I thought, hey, here's a guy who speaks superstar. He understands the fact that they see things that a regular person can't see, or they see things in real time that takes normal people 5 passes on video to see and recognize. They are at a different level, and so was Steve Nash, and he gets it, and he can finally be the guy that talks to these guys. But, and let me just pause for a second and say, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. They have you covered this season for more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. But he never had a shot with Kyrie. Kyrie's on a different level, and I don't want to put all the blame on one person because there's a lot of layers to it, but Kyrie gets a whole lot of the blame, and I have no problem, especially after what he did this week. I have no problem putting the bulk of the issue on him. Right away, he took a random hiatus in the middle of the season. He showed up at a birthday party. So the question is, well, why don't the rules apply to you? He had all of that stuff with COVID last year. Fine, personal choice, but your personal choice had consequences, and those were the rules in New York, and he didn't choose to follow those rules, and he cost his team. And now he puts those anti-Semitic links and a link to the anti-Semitic video, and he tries to pretend like I'm not promoting anything. Who, me? How dare you? So this is just one Kyrie crap fest after another. And that just no coach. You could have put Greg Popovich out there. You could have reincarnated Red Auerbach and put him out there. You could take John Wooden and put the ghost of John Wooden out there. Put them all on the same bench, one head coach and 2 assistants. They still would have no shot against Kyrie Irving and this jumbled mess that the Brooklyn Nets are. He is just tearing this whole thing down from the inside.
Yeah, look, I'm no fan of Kyrie whatsoever. Like, absolutely hate him as like a person. The player's good, but whatever. There's also Kevin Durant's culpability in this. You can't come back to the organization and say, like, I want both of these guys fired, and then they don't fire them because Joe Tsai, the owner, decides he wants to kind of put his foot down against the players. But as we learned, like that lasts for like a month or two, or in this case, it's lasted all of like 5 days, basically, it seems like, or 2 months from the offseason stuff. And then they let the players run the team. So no, like Steve Nash was never put in position to succeed. Sean Marks and his media availability after all of this even said that. He's like, we didn't really do him any favors. We didn't really put the right kind of team around him, which is a pretty damning statement on himself, I'd say, when it comes to all of that. And so Steve Nash is a scapegoat that was probably happy to get out of this situation. And he's probably thrilled. Like, he's the biggest. There's almost no winners in this Nets situation. And I'll get more into that in the next segment too, because I do want to elaborate on that. There's like no winners other than maybe Steve Nash getting this like parachute and eject button out of this plane that feels like it's going down.
That is the only winner in this. But some might argue that Ime Udoka is at least a winner in that he gets a job now. He is no longer the suspended head coach, or he will no longer be the suspended head coach of the Boston Celtics. He is soon to be the head coach of the Brooklyn Nets. What does that mean? How does that work? We'll talk about that in just a second. I want to encourage people to go check out the Locked On Nets podcast for full in-depth reaction from the local experts. And again, Locked On Celtics on the Ime Udoka stuff as well. I want to also encourage you to go check out BetOnline. I think the odds were originally on Doc Rivers. The slow Philly start put Doc Rivers in the lead to be the first coach fired. So anybody who had their money on Steve Nash, congratulations. BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs. You want to bet on football? You want to bet on the NBA? You want to bet on the World Series? Hope you took the Phillies in that. You can check out all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, in-depth analysis of every game that you can find. BetOnline is also your continued source for all of your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. You want to bet on hockey? You want to bet on fights? You want to bet on golf? It's all right there. So head on over to betonline.net. You can do it on your mobile device. BetOnline is where the game starts. Please gamble responsibly. I also want to encourage everybody to check out Locked On Sports Today. After you're done with Locked On NBA, they will also have a whole lot more on this situation in Brooklyn. Locked On Sports Today, from the games that matter to the biggest stories in sports. You go beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes, local experts, insights only Locked On can provide. Wherever you got the podcast, even if you're watching on YouTube, you can find Locked On Sports Today. Jake, Ime Udoka is reportedly ready to step in at some point, even as soon as this week, to be the new head coach of the Brooklyn Nets. I, for one, am not surprised one bit. Once he was gone in Boston, I looked at that Brooklyn situation and I said, I thought Steve Nash was going to last the season. I thought he was going to play this out however it went. And I thought Ime, after the year-long suspension, was going to land a job with the Nets where he was an assistant coach prior to taking the head job in Boston. So not surprising. It's surprising about the timing, but I'm sure Ime was sitting there looking at the league and studying a whole lot of Nets tape and a whole lot of Sixers tape just in case one of those coaches went out, because we can say whatever we want to say about what he did in Boston, and clearly the Celtics front office thought it was bad enough to suspend him for an entire year. But in the business of pro sports, other teams can say, hey, he didn't do it to us, and we'll have a talk with him and we'll straighten it out. It won't happen here. And he had proven himself after year one to be a really, really good head coach. So Brooklyn ready to take the chance. And as I said before, when we were talking about this, in the hierarchy of scandals that are going on in Brooklyn, I still think this is like third or fourth in the where does it fit in all of the craziness that's going on there.
Yeah, it does. It certainly doesn't crack like the top 2 or 3. I texted you, right after this happened, you being the Boston Celtics guy here on the network, so you're closer to this Ime Udoka story than probably anyone else is. And my first initial reaction to this was, this is freaking insane. This is freaking insane that this is what they're doing. Within like literally minutes of him being fired, it was basically announced that they were hiring him. And I think it just is all signs point to this. So moving quickly on this, they knew what they wanted to do. From a basketball perspective, before we get into the other stuff in a second, it makes sense. He's been an assistant there. He has a good relationship with Kevin Durant. And at a certain point, you have to wonder if Kevin Durant basically just said, that's who you've got to hire and I'll be happy. And so they went ahead and did that. And again, they're clearly letting the players kind of run a lot of the stuff here. So sure, he's a good coach. There's no denying that. And when you look at the situation with Boston, we don't have specific details on what happened here. If he was having affairs and that's just kind of against their code of conduct, or even a consensual workplace romance being, against their code of conduct, it's an Ime Udoka and Celtics problem, not an Ime Udoka and Nets problem. Now, if there were other more problematic aspects of it, such as power dynamics in play, that changes this conversation, I think, pretty dramatically. But let's just take it kind of at its face that, they seem to have a problem with him. They're moving on from him. He doesn't have that issue with the Nets. So okay. The optics of it, given everything that the Nets are going through right now, I think is terrible. And it very clearly shows that their owner, Joe Tsai, is focused more on winning. And I think if anyone comes out looking super bad out of all this, it's probably him this past week. He put out that statement about what Kyrie Irving did on Twitter with the anti-Semitic documentary, the conspiracy documentary, but there have been no repercussions for Kyrie Irving. There's no suspension, right? There's no fine. Basically looking like he's gotten off scot-free. So if Joe Tsai feels so morally strong about some of this stuff, you would hope he wouldn't hire a guy that a division rival is basically like, please take from us. Please take from us. Notice the Celtics aren't demanding any compensation, and maybe some stuff will come out about that later, but they're basically like, take our really good head coach. We want nothing to do with this guy. That's got to say something, I think.
It does. It definitely does. I spent like 20 minutes of my podcast getting into all of the why they wouldn't demand some compensation. But in a nutshell, it's first of all, I think they want to wipe their hands clean of this situation. They just don't want anything to do with this. They also don't want to put up any sort of legal fight. They don't want Ime to turn around and be like, what, you can't suspend me and not pay me, and then when it comes time to get another job, prevent me from getting paid somewhere else. That would have forced an ugly legal battle that they didn't want, and I just don't think they want this distraction. So I get into it much more deeply on Locked On Celtics, but the situation in Boston is messy, and it does involve some things that you talked about. It does involve power dynamics. It does involve some real messy stuff. And I think there are rumors I'm not going to get into, but I think once you go to New York, a lot of this stuff is going to start coming out. I think a lot of those things are going to start coming out.
Of course.
We're going to
start.
The
Celtics are going to leak that. Like, let's not pretend. They're going to do some stuff like that.
Right. Well, first of all, Ime is going to go on a campaign here to clear his name. And then the Celtics are going to come out and be like, no, we're not going to sit back and take this like, oh, this is all you suspended him for? There's going to be a back and forth. So this has the potential to get ugly over the course of the coming weeks. However, there are uglier things going on in Brooklyn right now. And this is where the questions really lie. The Kyrie situation is a mess. And we could spend the whole show talking about Kyrie.
Don't be started on that one.
Yeah. Why hasn't the team suspended him? Charles Barkley made a great point. Why hasn't the league done something? And I'm very curious about what the Players Association, he's one of the VPs in the Players Association. Is this who the NBA players want as their representative? He is a representative of NBA players. So there is a lot there that is still yet to be unpacked with him. And that's not going away anytime soon. How does Ime handle all of this? How does Kyrie respond to Ime Udoka? The reason why the Celtics were so good after mid-January and they had that big turnaround. Yeah, they bought into Ime Udoka. They bought into his coaching. He definitely deserved a lot of that credit. But also, that defense that he was trying to get them to play, everything that he was trying to get them to do, he was getting Jason Tatum to do that stuff. Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, Robert Williams, Marcus Smart. Smart won Defensive Player of the Year. And if you say, whoa, he didn't deserve it, whatever, Robert Williams was one of the guys. They say, well, Robert Williams should have gotten it over Marcus Smart. That's two guys on the Celtics that were in that mix for Defensive Player of the Year, both all defense. Tatum and Brown are pretty good defenders. Al Horford's a really good defender. And by the way, Tatum and Brown Tatum was first team All NBA. Brown is a multiple time All-Star. These are guys that are really, really good. The Nets have obviously Kevin Durant, who I think is going to be like this with Ime Udoka. They are cut from the same cloth when it comes to basketball. They have Kyrie Irving, who I've just been railing against, and I think rightfully so. And I don't know what he's going to do, how he's going to react, and how he's going to handle that coaching. They have Ben Simmons, who has the ability to be an elite defender, but how is he going to take hard coaching from Ime Udoka? Is he going to accept the type of coaching that Ime was able to dole out in Boston? I don't know about that. And then you go down the line, the rest of the guys that they have are incredibly flawed. I don't think this Nets team is capable of having the same turnaround Boston did, because they don't have the same level of players surrounding their star players. And even their star players are incredibly flawed on their own. I think Ime will help. And putting all the off the court stuff aside, he'll help. But I don't think this is going to do anything significant to change what their fortunes are going to be. maybe he takes them from 2-6. They just we haven't even talked about the game. They got railed in the fourth quarter. Zach LaVine crushed them in the fourth quarter. They had nothing.
20 points to 19. Zach LaVine outscored the whole Nets in the game, on Tuesday night. You're right, though. Their roster's not great. It's very, very top heavy. They've also been really injured with Joe Harris, right? Seth Curry, Ben Simmons has been missing games, and Ben Simmons just doesn't look right either. And unless Ime Udoka can get through to him and get him playing at his all NBA level, which is probably going to take time, it's not going to amount to a title run. Like, I don't think it's also probably one of the reasons why the Celtics were like, sure, take this dude, other than they do really want to wash their hands of him. And this just makes it all magically go away. So sure. But I don't think they're probably looking at the Nets as like a title rival right now, or a rival coming out of the Eastern Conference or anything like that. And they're like, go have at it, right? Like, certainly taking over this Nets team wouldn't be my ideal situation for a second act to try and get back into the good graces of the NBA, though maybe Udoka's pretty desperate given the situation that he's in, and so he's willing to take this sort of risk. But no one wants this job, right now. Also, by the way, how insulting to a certain degree is this to Jacques Vaughn, their interim coach in this game, who was almost the Pelicans head coach, who's well respected around the league, coached them in the bubble too a couple of years ago. And everyone thought he was going to be the interim for the rest of the season. A guy who's been rumored to be a head coach at times. He's going to get like 2 games at this and be like, go back to the bench, man. Sorry, goodbye.
See ya. Yeah, that's bad. That's bad. But speaking of that, like, I'll just wrap it up by saying this. Ime was able to put together his own staff, which was almost entirely Portland, Oregon people, and a holdover from or Will Hardy from the San Antonio Spurs. Will Hardy was his number one guy. He went off to become a head coach in Utah. He doesn't have that. He doesn't have his number one guy with him on the bench. He doesn't have all of his friends that he trusts on the bench. So that staff that worked with him, that was all part of the coaching success in Boston. So maybe when all of these guys have their contracts, they all expire after the season, maybe he can poach a few of them from Boston. And that whole coaching situation is something that is going to change. But he doesn't have the same staff, the same personnel, the same everything, support system that he had in Boston. So this is going to be significantly different for him. And the Nets lost to Chicago tonight, 108-99. The Miami Heat beat the Golden State Warriors 116-109. Jake, want to play some real or fake?
Oh, yeah.
Let's do that in just a second here. First, I got to remind people that the Locked On Podcast Network has your team every day. And that means if you want to find out more about this Minnesota and Phoenix game, that you can go to Locked On Wolves, Locked On Suns. If you want to have more about the Orlando OKC game, Locked On Magic, Locked On Thunder, OKC winning again. Wow, that's incredible. So check those games out wherever you get your podcasts. Also on YouTube. Okay, Jake, this was one of those things that we just loved so much that we both kind of like texted. You texted me, and as I was opening up my text to send you the quote from Jimmy Butler. So Jimmy Butler said when he was asked about like the Heat are struggling and all of that, he said, we're going to win the bleeping championship. I'm telling you. And well, in his first game, after making that big declaration, he played 37 minutes, scored 23 points, 8 assists, 6 rebounds, a block, big second half in Miami, closing out the Golden State Warriors. Both of these teams, Jake, are now 3-5. So before we play real or fake, how about that? 2 teams here that are contenders, the Warriors coming back off that championship, both 3-5. Any concern in your head about these 2 teams starting out so slowly?
In terms of the 2, I'm more worried about the Heat than I am the Warriors. Big believer in Steph, Clay, even Draymond, despite what happened this offseason. Jordan Poole getting his money, looking like a future star. Like, I trust the Warriors till they completely dismantle that team, and then I won't trust them anymore. So they get the benefit of the doubt from me. Miami Heat, not so much. Like, I am somewhat worried about them. If you're asking me if the Jimmy Butler question, if this is real or fake, his comment on if they're winning the effing title here, it is so fake. There are some big flaws with this Miami Heat team. They're not a good rebounding team. They give up way too many open threes and allow teams to shoot really well against them. The perimeter defense and closeout defense is not great. You know, they bloated salary kind of at the bottom, right? Duncan Robinson had a good game in this one, but this is a guy who's averaging 5 points on the year and making a lot of money. You're not going to win very many games when that's the case. You have Kyle Lowry, who really hasn't been that huge difference maker for them, like they really wanted him to be, like they paid him to be. And they're just overpaying for guys that aren't living up to that level of salary. And that's something that is absolutely going to hold you back. Jimmy Butler can only take you so far. We saw it in the bubble, and that's pretty far, but he's got to get some help. Otherwise, you get the Jimmy Butler exhausted picture, which is a great meme, fun, but that's not how you win an NBA title.
Yeah. I also will say that.
Yeah, it's like this is the easiest one we're ever going to have.
Right. Like, fake. Yeah, fake. Very fake. I feel like Elaine when she's talking about the faked orgasms with Seinfeld, and she's like fake. Like, this is very fake. The Miami Heat win this game because you got like Max Strus scoring 24 points for you. That's not something you're going to get. You're not going to get 17 from Duncan Robinson every night. You're not even going to get Kyle Lowry with 13 and 9 every night on 50% shooting. That level of efficiency is not going to happen for Kyle Lowry.
He's shooting 35% on the season. Like, you got plus games from guys that are okay enough players. Like, I don't mind Max Strus. He averages 13, something like that per game, right? So you'll get above that from him on occasion. But again, Duncan Robinson, who they're paying how much money to, is averaging 5, right? They were trying to give him away. He's making $16 million this year. He's going to make $18 million next year. Like, they tried to give him away, and no one wanted him. And that's a key guy for you going forward. I love Bam Adebayo. He's going to maybe be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. You just need more, and I just don't know how they make that happen.
The other thing is, and I'm not trying to call Jimmy Butler old, but at 33, that's starting to be the turning point. Like, 33 years old in the NBA is starting to be where you start to say, okay, maybe not. Is he going to play the back-to-backs? How you have to ramp him up more slowly. Jimmy Butler has done so much work to carry this team. I don't know that playing him 37, 38, 39 minutes a game in November, on November 1st, played 36-50 in this game. And he's why they got this win, or a big reason why they got this win.
No, he closed it out for me. He had 5 straight points late in the fourth, including a block on Steph Curry there. Like, He was amazing. He's why they won the game. He was clutch for them. He's great in the fourth quarter. We know who he is, but there's a reason he doesn't have a title.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, there is a reason. And he hasn't had a whole lot of help. He's also kind of worn out his welcome in a lot of places. So, this situation has been his best situation, but there is only so much he can do. And I don't think the minutes load early is going to be something that's sustainable. You have to be mindful of exactly what you said. If the Heat are going to win a championship, if they are going to make a run to a championship, it's going to be behind Jimmy Butler. I saw it in the Eastern Conference Finals. I saw exactly how much he raises his game, and you see it in person. You're like, what the hell is this guy on? He just has this amazing ability to raise his game, but you got to make sure he has enough gas in the tank to do it.
Yep.
Because the champion getting to that finals, that's hard. And if you're just going to hope that he wills you to the finals, this team is not going to get it done. They either need to find a way to make a move, or they're just not going to, I don't think they're going to get to the finals. I think Miami is a good team. They're going to be a tough out, and they are in that next tier. They're not in that top tier. And I just don't know if they're going to get there. So fake for sure. And also, I'm not worried about the Warriors.
Yeah, no one's. No, they're the Warriors. Like they've earned the bringing it all back to the beginning here. They've earned the benefit of the doubt. I'm not worried about the Warriors. I am very worried about the amount of threes and the percentages that the Miami Heat give up. Like that's a team that could lose in the first round of the playoffs against a hot shooting opponent, no matter what their seed is.
Hey man, look, some team is going to have a very disappointing offseason because they are a team that's really good. And they're not going to win. They're going to lose in the first round. A good team is going to lose in the first round. I mean, just look at the standings now. Milwaukee, Cleveland, Boston, Toronto, Atlanta, Philly's back even, Chicago, New York at 8. Okay. Not mentioned right now, Miami at 3-5, Brooklyn at 2-6. Those two teams have the potential, if things get right, to supplant one of these teams. But think about all of these. How many of these teams are just going to lose in the first round and be like, I can't believe after all that, we're done. That's going to be crazy. And that's going to be on both sides. It's
probably going to happen on a Tuesday night, and we'll get to cover it on a Wednesday.
Yes, indeed. Because we got that magic touch. I don't know what we've done to deserve this, but thank you for all the news breaking on Tuesdays. So that means the Wednesday show is us with smiles on our faces with plenty to talk about. That's me, John Karalis, host of the Locked On Celtics podcast, which I've pushed probably 32 times in this podcast. Follow me on Twitter at John_Karalis.
And I'm Jake Madison, host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast. I'm on Twitter at NolaJake.
Nick Angstead, Pat the Designer, tomorrow on Locked On NBA. So make sure you're checking out that show. Make sure you're checking out the Game to Game for all the in-depth. You know, we didn't talk about the games specifically because Game to Game right here in the Locked On NBA feed has that for you. Also, the Locked On Sports Today, much more behind the scenes there. So just Locked On. Everything is so awesome. We thank you for watching Locked On NBA and for listening to Locked On NBA and for sharing the Locked On NBA podcast with all of your friends and family. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.